Welcome, Steve, to Stratosphere WSLR, and we want to talk about your ballot initiative and a little bit about your organization, so why don't you get us started?
Okay, well, as far as the organization, I'm the executive director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, cleanenergy.org. We are a member of the Floridians for Solar Choice, and we're part of the coalition of groups. There's over 50 groups now in Florida that are trying to move a ballot initiative onto the 2016 ballot. And what we would like to do is, as you know, current Florida law only allows utility companies to sell electric power to a customer. This initiative would change the Florida law and allow solar companies to install solar panels on a home or business at no upfront cost, and give them the right to sell that solar power they generate to the home or business owner. It's expected this change would increase solar power use in Florida, and we're really excited that that would make that happen. So we're building a strong coalition of groups and individuals who are very much supportive of solar power. We're trying to get the laws changed in Florida that are barriers and impediments to allowing companies other than the monopoly utilities to sell that power. And we're off to a really good start, but we've got a long way to go.
Steve, when you talk about the utility monopolies, let's say in Florida, so we're talking about Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, Tampa Electric, and Gulf Power, and these are the only these are the only organizations that can sell solar to customers.
That's right. Florida is one of only 4 states that actually explicitly prevents another company besides the monopoly utility from being able to come in and sell electricity directly to customers. So if these companies put solar panels on your homes, they cannot sell you the electricity. And that law has been on the books for a long time, and a number of states have changed that. And when you look at where solar is really booming in other parts of the country, one of the mechanisms they use is this ability for what are called third-party sales or non-monopoly sales of electricity using solar panels. So we've seen other states really grow their solar market by removing this barrier. And now Florida, the Sunshine State, is one of only 4 that prevent it. Even Georgia last year removed this draconian provision from their state law. They did it through the legislature, but the legislature is really totally beholden to the big monopoly utility companies, particularly Florida Power and Light. They really are the 800-pound gorilla here. They throw their weight around. Their parent company, NextEra, talks a good line about doing renewables literally outside of Florida, but in Florida where they have their captive customers, the only solar they want to do is the solar they own, and they're only doing it a very limited amount when you consider the size of their company.
I see. And so it's to their advantage to actually not install solar and just keep the status quo as it's going.
Well, let me tease that apart a little bit. It's it's to their advantage to only install solar that they own, but they really are making more money at natural gas, so they're really not doing that much solar. What they don't like is when you and I, as homeowners or businesses, take the initiative to install solar on our own roof, and then we're not buying as much electricity from them because we're generating our own power. And we're actually putting some of that power back onto the grid where they no longer can go to the Public Service Commission and justify putting big, expensive plants into the rate base where they get a big rate of return on. So their goal here is to limit customer-owned solar and say that doesn't work, and it's going to, try to scare people and say rates are going to go up and all this other kind of stuff, when in actuality they just don't want people generating their own power. They want to control selling all the power and all the electrons because that's in their business interest and their business model.
Right. Keep it centralized. In other words, don't let it get distributed.
Absolutely.
Okay, now, what is the history in Florida? Has anybody else tried to launch an initiative like this, and what's gone on in the past?
Well, we would be the first to admit that using a ballot or a constitutional amendment is not the best way to make energy policy in the state of Florida.
Absolutely.
Normally, you would work with the state legislature or you'd work with the Public Service Commission. And our organization and a number of others, like the solar industry itself in Florida, have tried to go to the legislature and get the elected officials, the senators and the House members to actually move things that would help grow the solar market, because it would bring a lot of jobs and economic development. It'd help people lower their bills, and it would create a whole new industry in Florida that is good-paying jobs that would really help the Florida economy. The problem is that the way things happen in Tallahassee, it's not about what's good policy. It's about who comes with the most money into town and helps influence those elected officials through donations to their parties and their individual campaigns, because that's how the elected officials get into leadership in Florida, is by bringing a lot of money to their party. And so the utilities, the big monopoly utilities, particularly Florida Power and Light, are very effective at playing that game in Tallahassee. And then because the Public Service Commission, which is the other vehicle that we could get policy work through, are appointed by the legislature, and most of them, after they serve their term on the Public Service Commission, actually go to work for the utility companies, so they really have no interest in this. And so the normal systems you would use to get this policy through are broken in Tallahassee, and that's why we're going straight to the people through a people power initiative against these big monopoly companies that are controlling our interest in blocking solar in the Sunshine State.
I see. Okay, so this ballot initiative would be on the ballot in 216, and that would do what? That would allow the issue to...
Well, basically what it would do is it would remove the barrier, so that if Florida Power and Light and these monopolies don't want to come and let you put solar on your home and give you financing options to where, most people, when they buy their car, they finance it. When they buy their house, they finance it. When you're going to put solar panels on your house, the prices have come down dramatically, but they're still, a $5,000 or $10,000 investment, right?
Right.
And you want to be able to finance that. Well, there are companies that will help you do that. There's solar companies on the ground in Florida. There's companies from other parts of the country that want to come into the Florida market and help you buy down those upfront costs or get those upfront costs down, and then as part of the deal, they would sell you the electricity cheaper than what the utility's doing it. If the utilities were doing that, that would be great, but since they're not, because they don't want you to do it, we want to remove the barrier that prevents those companies from coming in and giving customers the opportunity to have an option for putting solar on their home without those upfront expenses. That's the key to this, is getting those upfront costs down, because when we talk to people in Florida, so many people want solar. They don't know how to go about doing it. They don't have the ability to, write a check at the very beginning, and so they're looking for financial ways to do that, and that's what these third-party sale options do.
I see. Wasn't there a government incentive built in a while back in Florida, maybe a couple years ago, to install solar?
Well, there were solar rebates that were offered, but they were programs that weren't really well managed by the utilities. And what would happen is that when they became available, they would immediately be gone like in 5 minutes. There wasn't enough money provided to them. People were very hungry for them. But the beauty is that the price of solar has come down so much that we don't need those rebate programs as much as we did. And we certainly need a methodology that allows for the sustained, orderly development of this market, and sort of turning on and turning off rebate programs and then having them disappear in 5 minutes after they're offered. That causes a up and down in the market that's really unreliable. What we need is sustained, orderly growth, and what we need is remove barriers, because let the market, let the free market, let competition, let commerce happen in the state of Florida, and not let monopolies stifle that.
I see. Well, let me ask you this. I'm a little confused. When you say that they can sell you electricity, in other words, if you go to a vendor that's not, one of this conglomerate group, they sell you back electricity, but how do they set up the infrastructure for that?
Well, the beauty of solar is that they're putting it right on your rooftop, so they don't need the big transmission lines and all the wires and everything like that, because the power would be generated right there at your home. So the panels actually feed you the electricity right in your home. It doesn't have to go onto the grid. And so they don't need all the infrastructure that's been developed by the utilities to build these big central station power plants and move that electricity to you. There's no line loss. It's real close. It's clean. It helps us with our environmental issues. So it's all right there at your rooftop. And it's just like putting in a compact fluorescent light bulb or something, because what it does is it reduces your need to draw power off of the grid, and therefore your house becomes its own little power plant.
I see. And then what about selling back? In other words, does, let's say Florida Power and Light restrict your ability to sell back if you create excess power?
Well, that is a big fight that's looming. One of the things is that a lot of the big monopoly utility companies don't like a provision that's called net metering, which Florida has a pretty good law about, which allows you to, if you generate excess solar power, you can actually sell it back to the grid and get basically a fair price for it. The utilities don't like that because what they want to do is choke this market off in the crib so that it doesn't begin to erode all the money they're making. Let me just point out, FP&L made $1.5 billion with a B, dollars off their rate base in Florida. They have no interest in anything changing because they're making money hand over fist at people's expense through the utility system. So when people start generating their own power, FP&L doesn't like that. So what we would do is, what this provision would do, would allow companies to be able to sell that power right there on the spot, right off people's rooftops, and then they would be buying less. And what the companies would do is set up a transaction where they could sell you the electricity less than what the utility is selling it to you, and then over the course of the time that you're buying that, you would save money on your bill, but you'd also then be paying back for those panels on your rooftop. And then at some point you could own them, and you wouldn't have to, your utility bills would be even lower.
Interesting.
Okay, one thing that I had recently been reading about was the fact that, we talk about the monopolies, being so powerful, is that they can change the rules at any time in the future. Like we have peak times where power is more expensive, and that can be manipulated. So people who go into these ventures, and believe me, I'm a complete proponent of it, but I think that people need to know what they can expect. And unfortunately, since everything is in such a state of flux right now, no one can guarantee what it will look like 5 years, 10 years down the line, as those monopolies do impose their
own manipulation.
Yes, their own manipulation to make sure that they still come out at the same benefit level. And I don't know if you can address that at all.
Absolutely. Well, we thought about that exactly. And so if you read our ballot language, it's worded very carefully to get through the Florida Supreme Court. The beauty of putting this in the state constitution, although it's not the best way you would do policy, is that once it's in there, it explicitly prohibits the utilities from then coming back and doing discriminatory or punitive things to customers who have chose to enter into these contracts. They can't come back later and basically then isolate customers who are doing solar power and then work against them just because they don't like what they're doing. So that's why it limits and prevents barriers to solar power development. That's the title of the ballot initiative. It not only gets rid of this provision that prevents it currently, but then it limits future barriers from being placed on customers just because they're no longer buying as much power from the utility. That's a very important provision, and you're exactly right. It's something we're nervous about because the political system is broken right now. It's dysfunctional. The regulatory system is broken and dysfunctional in Florida, and so we must intervene here and actually get laws that protect customers who want to, enter into the free market, have transactions, commerce, and be able to really express their freedom to have solar choice.
Now, there's a difference between solar choice and just, a recent poll that I guess you guys were part of that says that 74% of Florida say they would support a proposal to change Florida's current law and allow Floridians to contract directly. But most people, like myself, don't really know what that means. You still have to have some kind of vendor that you contract with. You're not just generating this power in your house and it's not going anyplace, right? I mean,
well, when you put a solar panel on your roof,
right,
during the time that the sun comes up and the sun comes down onto those panels, it generates electricity that you can literally use in your home. So you will not be using any power off the electric grid. Now at night, when the sun goes down, you will continue to buy electricity just like anybody else. But during the day, and particularly during some of those really hot times in the summer, when, if the utilities are doing what's called time of use rates, where they're charging more for the peak times, solar really actually performs pretty well. And so it is a good resource that we need to have more of in the state of Florida. And if it's happening on your home or happening on your business, then it helps you lower your energy costs over the long term, because once you make the investment, you're not going to be subject to the rate increase, or a significantly less amount of your bill would be subject. Now, again, if we're able to keep net metering, which we anticipate we will, then if you generate more power during the day when the sun's up, you can then pull some of that power back at night, and you'll net out. But even if you are putting solar panels on where you're just eliminating a portion of your energy use, in the long run, that still is an advantage to you, because you're controlling your own destiny as opposed to being subject to the rate increases that we know will be coming from the utility.
So what you're saying then is an individual house won't necessarily have storage. They can't themselves save up that energy they generated in the daytime and use it at night, or could you?
Well, that's the beauty. Some of you may have heard about Elon Musk, who has the Tesla car brand and the SpaceX that he's shooting the rockets off from Cape Canaveral. His company actually has a plan to provide battery storage cost effectively in people's homes. So let me step back for a minute just to make sure that we are at the cusp of a transformative time in how we're going to produce and consume energy in this country. This is somewhat like where computers were 25 years ago, or where cell phones were 15 or 20 years ago. We're changing. This is changing. It used to be that the utilities build a big plant, they push electrons down a wire to you, and that's all they do. Now that is all changing. And so things like battery storage, particularly with more electric vehicles and other things, are going to give customers options. Unfortunately, in Florida, the utilities want to limit those options so that customers can't transact and do these innovative things, because they want to control maintain the status quo, and they don't want to be innovative and change. But yes, if you have solar panels and you have a battery pack, then you could literally cut the cord to your house, and you don't have to be on the grid at all. That's an emerging option. The other thing is, if you want to stay part of the grid, you generate electrons through your solar panels during the day, and then you pay just like everybody else does at night when you use the grid at night. And that's fair, because you're paying your fair share for what you use, but you're also putting valuable electrons, you're decreasing use, so the companies don't have to spend as much on big plants, they don't have to spend as much on fuel and all these kind of things. We're overall making the system more efficient. That works good for customers. It is a good policy, but the utilities don't like it.
Right. But ultimately, I mean, I guess based on what you're saying, what will happen is if the utilities don't start to come around and we generate batteries and we generate windows that can produce solar, and it becomes really easy and it gets cheaper, people will just go off the grid completely, right? And they will no longer, the large companies will be useless if they don't start to cooperate now and become part of the process. They'll be dead.
There is a realistic point in the future where you can have what's called grid deflection, where defection, where people literally leave the grid altogether. But here's the sad thing about this, and this is what's so frustrating. The utilities could be partners with the people of Florida to help make this happen. They could be helping people put solar panels on their homes. And in Georgia and some other states, utilities have basically figured that out and said, look, we want to serve our customers. We don't want to stymie what customers want. We want to be a service industry and respond. And technically, because they are a monopoly, the state gave them a monopoly franchise not to enrich their shareholders, but to actually serve the customers first. And if they make some money at it, that's great. But what's happened now is the monopolies are being used primarily to serve the shareholders, and they really are using the customers just as a way to make money, and they're not being service-directed. And so what we want to do is, if customers want solar, FP&L and Duke and TECO and everybody else could get into this game just as well. But they know they make more money by putting a big nuclear plant or a big gas plant in the rate base, getting 10% rate of return every year for the next 60 years once they get it in there. And, I don't know what you're doing with your money. I can't go to the bank right now and get a 10% rate of return on anything.
Yeah.
But that's why the deal is so sweet for the utilities. The more they bring in, the more money they make.
Right.
So clean solar power in the Sunshine State is a way to let citizens start to control their own destiny, enter into a free market, have choice, and have the freedom to really control their own energy destiny.
All right, Steve, if people want to learn more about the petition and how to sign it and what to do, can you give us a website? Because we're running out of time. This is really fascinating. I could go another hour.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I just got a primer.
FL, Florida, flsolarchoice.org, flsolarchoice.org. You can literally download the petition on the website. You can go there and you can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. We've got a very active social media presence. We need people to be part of this because this is truly a David and Goliath exercise, and it's only going to be with people power that we win because the utilities are trying all kinds of ways to trip us up, spread ugly rumors, all this kind of stuff because they don't want to see this effort succeed. But we need people. We need people who support freedom. We need people who support clean energy. We need people who want competition and the market to work. Everyone who's hearing my voice that can do that, please go to flsolarchoice.org, and become part of this effort to open up solar in the Sunshine State.
Listen, this was really great talking to you. I've learned a lot today. Thank you so much, Steve. And
well,
carry
thank you.
on.
And this is going to be going on. We'd love to come back and update your viewers, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
So that was Steve Smith from Floridians for Solar Choice, but it's much larger than Floridians for Solar Choice, which I learned today. It's a huge coalition. And, yeah, there's been some really nasty gaming where they've been saying all kinds of crazy things about this coalition. I suppose the powers that be, the monopoly. So it's really important to support it. I thought that was great.